My name is Stanton Wilkerson, and I'm the current president of Harrison House. Harrison House is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the preservation and protection of African American history in the Las Vegas Valley. We formed our organization in about 2012, 2013. And the need for it was that we needed to have a not-for-profit wing for the Chamber of Commerce that actually owns the house. The house is owned by the Ward 5 Chamber of Commerce, and they're dedicated to developing business interests in the historic West Side community. I don't know if you all know where that is or not, but it's roughly bordered by Bonanza on the south, maybe Martin Luther King or Tonopah if you really want to stretch it to the west. North would go to Lake Mead, and then east would go to probably the freeway. Believe it or not, at one time when Harrison House came into being, there wasn't a freeway there. And it was located in McWilliams Town Site, which was the first settlement in the Las Vegas Valley. A lot of people think it was the Mormon fort, but it really wasn't. It was the the McWilliams Town Site. That was the early part of Las Vegas, and that's kind of important because the history of Las Vegas kind of takes some twists and turns with that early development, because McWilliams was sent here by the railroad that was being built from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles. And they found a water source right here in the Las Vegas Valley, and that was the where Lorenzi Park is now. And that was going to be a primary water source. Believe it or not, there was actually enough moving water at that time that it actually flowed down to where the plaza is now. And that was basically Union Station. And so McWilliams thought that this is going to be a great idea. I'll build this town site, and then I'll start selling lots, and I'm going to be a fat cat in a cheese factory, and all the little mice around have to come to me for cheese. Well, that didn't quite work out that way, because a gentleman by the name of Clark got with the railroad, and they set up the Clarktown site. And it was headquartered right on Main Street and went back east and south along Main back to past Las Vegas Boulevard. And when they started selling lots, they figured out a way to divert the water from the McWilliams Town Site and the railroad. So Clark got fat, McWilliams got skinny. That's important because as time went on, in the early before 1930s, the population here was very sparse. Most people came to the Las Vegas Valley basically passing through going to California. When they contracted to build Hoover Dam, that's when the black populations started to arrive in the Las Vegas Valley. Up until then, there were blacks in the Las Vegas Valley, and there was no conflict. In the 1930s, as the contract for the dam came about, the city of Las Vegas passed a rule that says everybody that's non-white has to live west of the railroad tracks. Okay, so that basically meant everybody that wasn't in the group A, you know, businesses, everything. You could come into town to work, but after your work day was done, across the tracks you go. These were called Jim Crow laws, and they basically had a bearing on integration, making integration of the races illegal. Along came a very enterprising lady by the name of Genevieve Harrison. And what she did was she developed a rooming house. And this rooming house catered to business travelers, entertainers, anyone with a significant amount of money. History shows that she wasn't exactly the Motel 6 of rooming houses. She was in it to win it. And so she opened up her rooming house, and she catered to such legendary stars of the time as Sammy Davis Jr., Nat King Cole, Pearl Bailey. And one of her big businesses, believe it or not, were people that were coming into Nevada to get a divorce. So in order to get one of those quickie divorces, you had to stay in the city of Las Vegas or the area in which you were applying for a divorce. You had to put in a significant amount of time. It really wasn't that significant. I think it was less than 6 weeks, probably about 3 weeks. Check your history book on that. But actually, that was one of Nevada's biggest businesses. A lot of people think it was gambling, the brothels, and the test site. But this was pre-test site, maybe testing things in another arena. But it was actually to get those quickie divorces. Matter of fact, that's the way the Las Vegas Strip, which was then the old Las Vegas Highway, or the Los Angeles Highway, that's how they funded a lot of the stars to come in and do entertaining. They would come here, do a show for a significant amount of time, stay in the hotels, or if they needed to fly back to LA to do a movie or another engagement, then they would come back and continue their residence here in Las Vegas, and their divorce was final. And then they would go back to LA, a free man or free woman, and woohoo, and there you'd go. The other neat thing about Las Vegas, you know, is kind of like predates that saying of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, back then, the owners of then the casinos on the Las Vegas Strip, and even on the west side, the club owners and even the rooming houses like Mrs. Harrison's house, had a very strict rule on confidentiality. And as a matter of fact, as we've been exploring Harrison House, we discovered frameworks where there were doors that were actually leading off the bedrooms so that the guests could actually enter and exit without going in and out the front door, which also meant that their guests could come in and out without utilizing the front door, and that way whom is entertaining whom and when and for what purposes stayed on the hush-hush. There's a lot of talk, and some of the, as they say, facts run quick and loose sometimes with exactly how much mob influence actually had over picture taking in their hotels and around the pool areas. But they did designate, as you look through the Las Vegas News Bureau, you'll see various activities for promotional pictures. But one of the things you won't see are any of the stars ever in a compromising position. So that kind of goes along with the privacy, and that kind of carries over into Harrison House. Even though the guests that frequented Harrison House came to be quite friendly with the neighborhood children. In fact, would review their report cards and, you know, give them some change or a buck or something. A quarter went a long way and made a kid very, very happy, you know, and a dollar was just like Christmas in the 1940s. So if a young man or young woman, as has been reported in our history, received a dollar from a famous person that was visiting Harrison House, that just made their day. That's just money they, you know, like finding a bag of cash on the side of the street. But what we've tried to do with Harrison House, kind of tying it all together, is that when Catherine Duncan purchased the house and then donated it to the Ward 5 Chamber of Commerce, they discovered that when people and businesses wanted to donate to Harrison House, there wasn't a mechanism so that that donor would receive credit, like a tax credit, like a tax write-off. And that's why Harrison House had to become a nonprofit organization, a 501c3. Under my first tenure as president of Harrison House, we were able to get ourselves not only listed on the Federal Registry of Historic Places, but we also received our 501c3 nonprofit charitable designation. That's very important because if someone, say like Caesars Entertainment, would like to donate $5,000 to us, they can now do it and receive a charitable write-off. If you want to buy a brick like we use in our Building the West Side Community One Brick at a Time fundraiser, you could then, when you do your income taxes at the end of the year, you can list that you donated $100 to this nonprofit organization. So that's kind of, in a kind of roundabout way, how we try to generate money. Our problem then comes in, how do we generate excitement and want people to generate interest in donating to Harrison House? That's our weakness. I mean, we can do a lot of things, particularly in this neighborhood where you have to almost wear a lot of hats. It would simplify things if all we did was African American history. And you come to Harrison House, you walk in the door, or you read the placard that's out there on the sidewalk, and you read our little mini description, or you took the tour, and that was it. Our life would be fairly simple. But as it happens, we recognize that the things that are holding our neighborhood back are that the people with the information that can make your life easier don't feel it's their job. So what we've done at Harrison House is, like, we take off our historian hat and we put on our energy conservation and our green hat, and we have learned on how to weatherize your home. So we have information about that. We recognize that some of the people that come to our doors are military veterans, like myself and like others, who may be starting over, or they're trying to start a business, but they don't know where to go to get that information. It would be easier for us if we just said, well, we got a pamphlet over here, and I think you can go down to someplace downtown or someplace over here. Don't bother us, because all we do is history. We have not taken that approach. We've taken it upon ourselves to find out that information and how we can help individuals out. That creates a lot of problems, because when you go to your donor community and you start to tell them that story, they start scratching their head and their eyes kind of glaze over, and they kind of want to know, well, why in the world would you want to do that? You guys are history. You know, protect and preserve, preserve history, protect the future of the history in Las Vegas Valley. That's your job, that's your mission. And we just really haven't been able to settle on that. It's very frustrating, and I know, Ed, you and I have talked about that. And it's very frustrating, but we really realize that when you're in a community where the resources and resource information is scarce, and you have the ability to garner that information, seems to me you have a responsibility to share it. And I think for you as students and our marketers and people putting together our materials, knowing that we have this ability to do these other things, and we want to do it, to help us put together a platform in which we can be known for as a African American Cultural Center, if you will. I really kind of don't like putting names like that on it myself. As Ed mentioned, I spent 2 years in Vancouver, British Columbia, and it was like my second time, if you will, going there, my first time living there for an extended period of time. And I bring that up because, has anybody been to Canada? Either British Columbia or any other parts of Canada? Spend a lot of time there? Okay. And then you can kind of attest. You go to somebody and say, who are you? They're Canadians. Am I right? Everybody's Canadian. There's no African Canadian. There are French Canadians. They're very big on that part.
Like Jamaican, like Caribbean.
But they don't use that designation as I'm a Caribbean Canadian. For the most part, the ones that I encountered in my time up there, for the most part, everyone's considered Canadians. They celebrate their own cultures, their own histories, and things like that. They have a vibrant Asian community. They have a vibrant, their Jamaican festivals in the summertime in Vancouver are legendary, and even the one in North Van is quite fun. Been there, done those. But it's that sense of, it's a country first, your culture kind of takes the second thing. When we come back to the United States and we talk about a thing like Harrison House, seems like in order for us to get the biggest bang for our buck, we got to announce that we're an African American cultural center. Even though the reason that we exist is because at the time the United States had these antiquated Jim Crow segregation laws. Pointing that out in history is important, but at the same time, just recognizing history for history's sake, I think is important.
I lived in Hawaii for 3 years, and the biggest non-paying tourist attraction is the Pearl Harbor, the Arizona Memorial. It's a very sacred experience. It doesn't disparage at all the Japanese. As you know, the history of the attack on Pearl Harbor. They are the #1 tourist to Hawaii. And so, but I don't think their motive is not to so much offend them. It's just better they just tell the story without any twists on it, Matt. I see that your situation is a little similar.
You're right. It's kind of like I went to Savannah, Georgia, and they have it's a beautiful place, the moss-covered trees and the big palaces or houses that are like around the square. You take a tour there, they talk about everything that's went on. They never mention slavery. They'll tell you if you push them, oh yeah, we had slaves there, but the sheriff came in and abolished slavery. What they don't tell you is the mayor overstepped him and said, we have an import place right down here on the dock where all the slaves were held when they came in off the boats. But they make this big deal of not talking about the offensive things. What we try to do at Harrison House is not talk about things as they were offensive, but point out that these are things that happened. When you come to Harrison House and you stand on the corner of F and Adams and you look back to the south, you see this bridge on the opening of F Street that says, welcome to the West Side. And that's important because you really should never have to have that had happened. There shouldn't have ever had to be a bridge, except for the Nevada Department of Highways basically walled in West Las Vegas with all the freeways. But back before those highway bridges kind of I wouldn't even say segregated the community, walled it in, and only for a few holes. and bridges can you get in or out of the west side without, basically, unless you come in from the north, you can't really get into the West Las Vegas community without going under a freeway or a bridge or something like that. Which is, you know, if you talk to any highway planner, the first thing they'll tell you is that bridges and freeways like that, when they cut across the neighborhood, one side prospers and one side fails. You know, that's just in some sort of planning DNA. But getting back to Harrison House and what we're trying to do there, we want folks to, a lot of people come to town. My wife attended a conference a couple of nights ago. And one of the speakers from Las Vegas, or one of the guests, I can't remember which, kind of lamented that, you know, if you go up Spring Mountain Road, and just as you get to Valley View, you start to see all this Asian district. And continues almost all the way up to Decatur, maybe even probably goes to Decatur. Now it's almost all the way up to Jones. When they say, you know, but where's the black community? Where are the hairdresser shops? Where are the barber shops? Where are the music stores? Where's the clothes, the haberdasheries, the shoe shops? Those things, you know, where's that part of the west side? The best they can do is point to is where all the churches are located. That's kind of like our, from a black standpoint, our vibrant foothold in the community are the collection of churches that are located on the ABC and almost all the way up to, anyway, Martin Luther King Boulevard. But that's kind of the thing that we bump up against, if you will, in trying to market Harrison House. You know, where is it? Now, if you stand in the middle of, say, Main Street, or Las Vegas Boulevard and Fremont, you walk out there, you have your handy compass in your hand, and you say, I want to go to the west side. If you go the way your compass points, you're going to end up in Summerlin, and you're never going to see Harrison House, because that labeling of the historic west side and pointing west to the railroad tracks has nothing to do with the compass. That's one problem. Where are you? The other problem, who are you? You know, are you the African American community? Are you the community that are descendants of the North Atlantic slave trade? Are you Negro, colored, or any of these other things? What is the good markable name, you know, pointing that way? So you can be politically correct and not offend visitors that are coming in from out of town that may want to identify with something else. One of the markets that we have discovered that the Korean community is very interested in seeing all these things that relate to African American history in Las Vegas. And part of it goes back to the Korean conflict, because that was the first World War where black Americans were front and center and met the local population in a more of a being a liberator. And so some of the older generations remember those individuals as the first, quote, Americans that they encountered during that time and during that. So again, that's one of the reasons why when we talk about what is the Harrison House reference to or connection to the military, is that part of history, is that military officers, when they came to Las Vegas, if they were coming here for vacation time, liberty, leave, or if they were at the Nellis Air Base, or before then it was the Army Air Force Gunnery Range, which was located going toward the Sheep Mountain Range. I hope everybody knows their geography and their mountains. Back up that way where they had the gunnery range, those individuals weren't allowed to to go into town other than to come in on the west side, to stay in hotels or visit nightclubs in the 1940s up until the mid-1960s, after the Moulin Rouge Agreement, which ended, quote, segregation in the hotels and things. They too had to stay on the west side. So they were guests at Mrs. Harrison's boarding house. So again, all those things tie into that. The reason why, again, why we like to talk about our energy conservation things is that people don't want to live on the west side sometimes because the houses use too much energy. People don't know how to weatherize their homes, and so they move out, they leave the houses abandoned, what'd you call them, the bad influence people that need to sell things out the back door and different things like that, or just want to flop someplace, start to move into them. Next thing you know, there's a fire in your neighborhood, or you got police action in your neighborhood, and then you get a reputation that this is one of the most dangerous areas in the Las Vegas Valley. Again, hurting our ability to market Harrison House as a tourist destination. So one of the things is why we become involved in different avenues is because that these things make up our community. And until you rectify some of those things that are impacting your community, you can't get people to concentrate on preservation of African American history if they're worrying about, if I go into your museum, am I going to come out and find I don't have any tires on my car? Now, if you ask the local concierge at your hotel that I'm going to F and Adams, he'll be saying, I hope you have a rental car and I hope you got the extended insurance on it. Because that's that mindset. Doesn't happen. People's cars get stolen all over the place. We have 2.5 million people in the Las Vegas Valley now, so you can't say that the place that has less than 36,000 people in one area has got to be the most crime-ridden area in the valley. So those are some of the kinds of things and the challenges we get. What is our competition? Mormon Fort, Mob Museum, Springs Preserve, Spring Mountain Ranch State Park, Clark County Museum, the Atomic Energy Museum. All of them been around a whole lot longer than we have, and all of them have deep roots into the Las Vegas business and philanthropic community. You know, we're just scratching the surface. We've been able to get some grants through the City of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission. Who else has given us grants? Whole Foods gave us a grant to do a community garden. And again, why do we need a community garden at a historic site? It's because sometimes when people, it may be the community garden that gets someone to bring their family to see a community garden, because the kids never thought that food only came from Walmart, Safeway, Albertsons, or, you know, Whole Foods, and never seen a carrot come up out of the ground. You know, anybody in here ever pulled their own carrots up out of the ground? Other things, to see 2 or 3 people, but there's a whole lot of other folks that didn't raise their hand.
The rest of them don't care at all.
Well, you know, hey, I wouldn't enjoy doing all that kind of stuff. Don't get it crazy. But that's the kind of thing that, and we kind of feel that, hey, you may come here for the vegetables, but you may walk out knowing a little bit more about history. And that may lead you to go around to some of the other historic sites in the valley. You may come in for the history and walk out with a pamphlet on how to weatherize your home and save some money, so now you can go and do something else with the family. You may come in for history and walk out knowing that as a veteran, you can go to certain places and get some benefits. That's why we have all these different hats around, because we realize that this information is not readily available within our community, and you have to, it's your responsibility as a neighbor to be able to give your neighbor the advice and information that they need, if you have it.
Can I pause here and see if anyone has any questions?
Yes.
Anything he said already today, or maybe just generated something that he hasn't said?
It's interesting you mentioned the community garden because there are some that's already popping around the valley, so that's added more to the competition, I guess.
Well, no. I kind of feel that a good tide lifts all boats. So if you know that there is a community garden, like the Roots Community Garden is up on Tonopah, which is near us, and there's also one at the old downtown transportation center. There's a community garden. They have a market down there. But they say Smith's Food King didn't build one grocery store and put it one place and say, oh, that's enough. Walmart didn't just build one superstore and say, hey, we've got this side of town covered. Anybody else that wants to be in competition, I can build one over here and one over here. We think our community garden, where it is, we're the closest one to the tourist and entertainment district. You know, that's outside of the downtown core. And as Las Vegas tries to encourage its visitors to come out of the hotels and visit downtown Fremont Street and move around the community, having that community garden at a historic site, we're the only ones that can say that we are on the National Registry of Historic Places, and, by the way, we have a community garden.
Who runs that garden? How many volunteers do you have to run some of these things?
We have, right now, the Right Society is the organization that's manning our community garden. They're building it from scratch, and they had probably about 12 to 15 volunteers out there this past weekend. Generally speaking, there's probably about 4 to 6 that will be taking on the responsibility of the garden.
Now, I've recently seen the Springs Preserve Garden, very impressive. How's yours compared to that?
Ours is just starting. We're still building our planter boxes and tilling the soil. So we won't be, well, we will be as things pick up. One of the things, again, about the community, building your community, we have a lot of vacant land around in the west side. And the Right Society thought, you know what, instead of laying all these pieces of vacant property just stand there vacant until someone decides to buy them, and now you have our weeds growing up and glass and old dishwashers and whatever else people can kick off the back of their pickup trucks. Why not find out who owns them and see if they're willing to allow it to be a community garden until such time as they sell the property? That way these properties are in use. They're not an eyesore. If you drive by them, it just doesn't look like, you know, someone decided to leave town or, gee, I wonder what's wrong with this area because there are no houses right here. There's all this empty land. So, and plus all that empty land starts blowing dust and weeds and all kinds of things. So again, it takes a start. You have to make that first step. You have to show, in our community, people don't make a move until they see someone else doing it successfully.
So you're into history and horticulture.
I told you, it hasn't gotten any easier since we're also into bike safety too, because I ride bicycles quite a bit, and there's nothing worse than seeing an old man get hit by a car on a very expensive bicycle.
Well, there clearly is a need for the community to accept what you're doing and buy into it. I mean, how do you feel that's going on, particularly the religious community?
We have a very good tie with them. You know, they're very responsive and very receptive to what we're doing because, you know, we're doing something positive for the neighborhood.
What can they do for you? Are they interested in helping build that center?
They're interested in helping us. What they're, I think, in my opinion, is they're waiting to find out what is it that we can do. Sometimes, and this is kind of almost a bias of mine, I don't have factual evidence on it, but most times when I work with religious groups, first thing they want to do is start putting in the Bibles and the religious materials. We're a 501c3 nonprofit.
How many of these congregations have members from outside the area that come there just on Sunday?
Probably 99.9%.
And where do they live?
Everywhere.
Nice neighborhoods?
Yes, they come.
New neighborhoods?
Yes.
Good jobs?
Yes.
Aren't these potential donors?
Yes.
Why do they come there to those churches and to that community?
Because that's the historic area for where the churches were. If you go all the way back again to the 1930s, when there were enough people to start churches, you know.
They got roots there.
They have roots there. They actually, most of those folks that come into those churches have family histories there. And so their family, they may even still have relatives that live within, let's say, a 4-block area where Harrison House is located. So they know about that. They're willing to get involved. What kind of happens, and it's really telling and it's kind of sad in a strange kind of way. If we receive, say, a $500,000 grant to completely renovate and modernize and put in state-of-the-art presentational things within our display area. Say we had walk-up displays where, you know, the history of all the known famous folks stayed. You could walk up and you could take a listening wand, or you could get it on your cell phone, or get it on your laptop and get that kind of information. Kind of like the mob museum. If you could walk up, if we were, quote, a mini mob museum, then all of those people, all those over 30,000 of them that come in each Sunday, most of them drive right by Harrison House as they go up F Street to the larger churches. That would be a primary stop. But as you're in your infancy and you don't really have a flourishing, high finish exterior on your building, your landscaping looks like a dust bowl, all that cosmetic kind of thing that people like to give to someone that's successful. People do not like to be the first one to give on the startup.
Unless they believe in it, they have vision.
That visionary group is very, very small. It's sad to say, but it's small.
Now, you've got a lot of residents that probably have in their attics and under their bed documents and history that you could use. What are you doing to communicate to bring that stuff in? We
try to, again, that's how we find out about that kind of stuff, is by hosting events that they may, if we did a community garden and their grandchildren are coming to the community garden, and I'm the grandfather and the parents are working, but I got the grandchildren this weekend, and so I'm going to take them over to the community garden at Harrison House because I saw a public service announcement about it on Channel 5. So I walk in and I find out, hey, it's much more than a community garden. Hey, there's some historic information here. That maybe rings the bell to go, you know what? My grandmother had a house around the corner. I bet she knew Mrs. Harrison, or she may have known about some of the people that stayed. Some of that stuff's in a box, in an attic, and I don't really know what to do with it. The paper is like in a box now. It's turning from white to yellow because it's so old and been exposed to the wind. There are pictures. Hey, can I donate this to you? What we need to be able to have And what we're striving to do is be able to receive these documents, catalog them, put them in a display that keeps them safe so other people can come in to enjoy it. And Ed, that was a good question. That's why we get involved in some of these other things, because they are a stimulus that when people are thinking about doing whatever it is that they may be driving by to do. We're involved this weekend in a program called First Family Friday. And it's kind of on the Stop the Violence theme. The Right Society and some other groups came to us and said, hey, can you host this at Harrison House? You know, they could have went to the West Las Vegas Library, they could have been right over to the West Side School, but they came to us. Sometimes it's so, because we're non-governmental, it's kind of easier to deal with our board of directors and certainly our president. So that's going to bring in a whole different generation, because when we start talking about Jim Crow laws, segregation, denying people of human rights and how long ago this is going back, when you have someone like KRS-One, a rapper of note, start talking about those kind of things, he's speaking to this generation and speaking to them in their language. If I start talking about it, their eyes glaze over and they're like, when is this fool ever going to shut the hell up? So it's kind of like, again, why we do what we do. We try to bring in someone that's going to lead a population to us, so then they discover Harrison House.
Well, that's what social media does. You're doing old school social media. Social media is just the old one-on-one.
Right.
People over the fence and all that.
And
Which is why you need some physical printed pieces
right.
for them. And if those printed pieces reflected the vision of what it can be and sell that idea, I think you might have people willing to
that's what,
donate
yeah,
to the
exactly.
foundation.
We were moving on that line, and we needed a rendering. And we had helped out the UNLV's design school when they were trying to do a new West Las Vegas plan. You know, we had them come over, kind of like your classes have done in the past. Some of the students came over there, took the tour, talked to the neighborhood. We introduced them to folks around the neighborhood. So this year when we went back and said, hey, we need an architectural rendering, we got a shot at getting a $200,000 grant from the state of Nevada. They told us, well, if you make a $25,000 donation to the design center, we may be able to squeeze you guys in. Now, these are the folks that we've helped. So that's why, you know, there's a thing in banking, banks will give money to people that have money. You know, kind of along what you're saying. People will donate to an organization that already looks like they don't need it.
Yeah, I understand the catch-22 or the chicken and egg thing here, but that's the challenge before you guys in this class, is to understand who are the audiences and how are you going to reach them and what is the message. The problem that a lot of students working with with Harrison House had in the past was that they come over and they look at it and like, well, there's nothing here. They're really disappointed in it. And they can't see what it can be. And that's if you have tours in that. So they've all recommended, look, you need to get the aesthetics, the front, the facade done a little bit better. Doesn't matter if it's not fully developed. And there have been suggestions that there have been volunteers to come over and paint the house if you just buy the paint. And I was told that that didn't happen because they didn't know what color to make it.
Again,
So I'm just wondering about the restoration, the facade, that you have something other than an artist rendering.
we have an entire
Visualize, you know.
we have an entire plan. What we don't have is the visual plan, because we can't. You know, we have. I hate using the word we can't. We have not been successful to date at getting an architect architect to sit down with us gratis and say, let me help you with your vision. Do you want it to do this? Do you want it to do that? We have an opportunity, again, as I was saying before, in the next couple of weeks with the state of Nevada to get some funding, and that rendering is going to be a part of that funding. You know, there'll be monies enough in there to sit down with an architect and pay them. And that, I think, will help us, because people, when they see that little drawing of, wow, this is what it's going to be, this is where the shrubs will be, this is where, you know, and the way that we built our garden, you know, we can move the plants out of the way while the reconstruction is going on. Hopefully, you know, we'll get well over $100,000 coming out of this grant, knock on wood, and you know, some of those things will be done. We have to be very careful in painting the building, because we have to notify the state of Nevada Office of Preservation, as well as the Department of Interior Historic Places, that we're getting ready to make some changes, not to mention the owner of the property, that you're getting ready to enhance it, and you don't want to build it or paint it a color that wasn't existed in that area if you want to keep that historic designation.
What documents, what plans do you have now set in stone, sort of directions that these students can use? Because in a few weeks, they need some assets, they need some visual assets, and they may create them. If anyone here is into, you know, doing an artist rendering, and that's fine. But what assets do you have to give to them? I know you've got a business plan. You have the SWOT analysis that we put together for you. What else is there that these students can say, this is firm to work with and not just an idea?
We have, and I can give them, as far as printed information, the thing that I rely on most, because it's factual, is our nomination documents for the National Register of Historic Places.
I don't think I've seen that one, so.
Yes. And that gives you all the chapter and verse of, and we do have some architect pictures of what the print version of the house is, and I'll get that scanned and get it over to you.
Can I get from you everything that can possibly be used so we can get it up online so the students have as resources?
Yeah.
Right now, I've got pictures of all the Sammy Davis photos in the house, and a few
They're
other things
cute.
like that. It's very limited.
Right. And that's, in a way, it is part of our problem, part of the history of the problems, is that when I first got there was this beautiful green tree that was standing on the back southwest corner of the house. That tree got rotted, wind blew it over, and part of it fell on the house, and so now it's cut down, so there's not a big tall tree on the property anymore. So if you see the old pictures of the house, it has a beautiful tree standing out there, or at least a green tree, even though the windows were boarded up in that picture. But we'll do some updated photographs. We're just finishing off our landscaping. That'll be done on Friday.
Okay, good. Well, let me ask this.
Oh, this gentleman over here had a question.
Like back to the previous Mr. question, do you have any historic photos of the area?
Historic photos of, there are some. I would have to get it through either the Nevada State Museum or the Las Vegas News Bureau.
Yeah, I was looking at a video of the place. Right now, I don't know how it is looked right now. I'm probably going to take a drive down there myself. But how is it inside? Is it still, I was looking at a year-old video. Is it still having stuff everywhere? Did you guys organize it?
We organized it a lot, and then somebody came along and reorganized it. So I think it's in much better shape than what it was.
So you have additions onto that. The initial home is the 40s, and then there's like a 50s or 60s edition, and then there's the 70s and 80s edition. Is that correct?
Actually, according to the historic documents, renovations went from the 40s all the way up until the late 1970s and 80s.
But one of the main things is what is original during the segregation period.
The main house and the caretaker's quarters that's in the back, and are the main portions of the house that were there.
Now, I've got 6 teams, 3 students to work on this, and I'd like to divide it up. I'm trying to figure out how to divide up their approach, okay?
Mm-hmm.
One approach would be to have a team work on a specific audience. The general audience is prospective donors, so you can get some funding.
Mm-hmm.
You can have sub-audiences of the churchgoers who have roots there. Others could be corporations, different audiences, different appeals. Another audience would be the community themselves, to sell them on what it is, to get them more involved, to contribute historical facts, to donate hours to, if it's going to be a community cultural center, let them get more involved somehow. And so you're looking at volunteers to be committee members and keep things going. There's an audience. Then you got an audience to historians, historical society. I mean, you could break it down that way, or you could break it down by problems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how would you break down the top 3 or 4 areas that are challenges that are you need communications effort to start it to bloom?
I would say donor community,
Fundraising would be one.
fundraising. Volunteers would be third, even though they're the most important. Especially younger volunteers, because it kind of helps, one, build a new audience. So that would be 2. I think the third one would be that community visitation. And third would be our out-of-state visitors. Our fourth would be our out-of-state tourism. I'm a firm believer of generating interest from our local population. I think we could keep the doors on their opening and closing and get a strong visitation foundation. We have 2.5 million people in the Las Vegas Valley. That blows my mind. When I got here, there were 800,000. And I've only been here altogether a little over 22, 23 years. So I'm saying if we get a strong local visitation and positive, that come out away with a positive attitude about Harrison House and the work that we're trying to do there, they'll want to maybe volunteer, they'll want to donate, and the one good thing they'll do, they'll start to tell people that come to town to visit them about that, because one of the things I found, especially from living in Canada, that folks that come down from there, not everyone wants to visit the hotel casinos.
You mentioned tourism, getting tourists there and local people to see it. What about the area of having right there inside materials? Posters, displays, brochures to take away. In other words, to have a more visual presentation other than the building itself.
One of the things, and I think one of your last groups were putting some of those things together. I remember before I left having a one-pager. I got a copy of something. I know I said I wasn't going to go running around. Oh, shoot, it better be here. Here we go. By history, I come from from working with the Regional Transportation Commission and the Bureau of Land Management in their marketing and public information areas. One of the things I learned about working with government, if you see something that another government agency has done, yeah, copy it, especially if it's good. This is a one-pager that's done by the Clark County Outdoor Museum. And I'll go ahead and I'm going to leave it here, but I'll let you guys kind of take a look at that. That's for their Mojave Museum. And one of the things I like about that is it's neat, it's clean, the ink doesn't run off in your hands, and it gives you the information that you need. I'd love to have one of those. You know, it's not really expensive to produce, and it's something that when people come through on a quickie, they can pick that up, take it away with them. It fits neatly back into their packs, carry-on, and when they get back to wherever they're going, they can say, you know what, when I was in Las Vegas, yeah, I went and shopped and spent a bunch of money at the Fashion Show Mall, but this was a really neat place, and they can show that.
You familiar with this piece? Can you comment on that one?
Ooh.
I picked this up when I went over to Harrison House one time. Katie gave it to me. It's a map of all the places of historical interest. What do they call that? The historic trail?
Oh, is this the Pioneers Trail? Yes, this is the Pioneers Trail.
And there's a little blurb in there about Harrison House.
There's a little, yeah. And one of the things that we've done is that we actually produced one of those quite some time ago. One of the things that we were working on when I decided it was time to go to Canada was a Bike to Pioneers Trail. And more or less to get folks out, and there's quite a large biking community in Las Vegas. And so some of the...
It shows where all the biking trails are.
Yeah.
On the back.
Oh, it does? Oh. No, I don't think these... Well, it has all these multicolored things on it, so I think some of them actually could be bike trails. But
I
if...
read some copies of this. I thought I had some more than just that one. But we're interested in any kind of...
Yeah, they do have bike routes on this. But one of the problems with... Don't get me started on Las Vegas bike planning. Boy, I could be here for a long time. Is that the connective places are not really where everybody wants to ride. So, you know, they've done a marvelous job. I'm not going to say they haven't done a good job, but it's kind of like, okay, so you start riding on the Pioneers Trail and you're in a bike lane, then you get ready to go down another street. There's no bike lane. And so now you're like in the middle of traffic with people cursing at you and throwing objects out the window, yelling all sorts of manner of things that really hurt my feelings, quite frankly. But that's the way their bike thing goes. So it's kind of like they took some time, and I've been working with the Regional Transportation Commission's bicycle planner. And, you know, he's taken one of the county commissioners on a ride. I want to take our newly elected Ward 5 council member for our ride along the Pioneers Trail. When they're out there, even though they have a police escort with them, and they still almost get run off the road, then they'll see the problem with this incoherent bike trail. You know, I mean, there's some wonderful places to ride in Las Vegas Valley. There's some great things to see, and I'm glad they got, you know, several stops like the Moulin Rouge, the Mormon Fort, you know, a lot of different places, the Boneyard, you know.
Moulin Rouge is gone now, though.
I know.
They tore it down.
They finally tore it down. There's only one sign still standing left on the property. And the real sign, the script one that was done by Betty, what's her name? Darn, slips my name. Don't get old, because you can't remember. But anyway, there's a famous designer that did the Moulin Rouge, the same designer that did the Welcome to Las Vegas neon script sign, also did the Moulin Rouge script writing sign that was on top of it. So there's a lot of things, and there's some of these materials. What we'd like again to do is to be able to get this on one sheet of paper or a simple fold. Because if you try writing on your bicycle and trying to figure out this, you're going to have some issues, okay? So want to try to keep things to one sheet of paper, you know, and or being able to get it, because someone told me like now everything's in your hand. So where the hand goes, the eyes follow. So we can get it so that someone can pull it up in their handheld device, you know, or stick it on the mount on their bike, and they can ride the Pioneers Trail, and it will tell them where they're going to go. And then maybe we can code in a audio version of description of what they're seeing when they get there. The same way with Harrison House. You know, we want to be able to tell the Sammy Davis Jr. story, or the story of Hannah Brown, who was one of the local residents that met a lot of the stars when they came to Harrison House. We want to be able to get this thing out of the pen and pencil era and be able to move it on, and be able to have materials that let people know that we have grown up, you know, that we have a secure, you know, we have one of the old menus from the Moulin Rouge restaurant in Harrison House. We have a copy of the Life magazine story that featured the Moulin Rouge at that time on its opening night. So a lot of the things that you were talking about, excuse me, are there for people to see now. There are things that, you know, we want to get into clothing and, you know, different memorabilia of some of the stars that stayed there. But before we could get there, we had to make sure that crackheads weren't coming in and stealing every doggone thing. So we had to secure our envelope.
So you mentioned that your competitions to the other museums, and the city promotes the museum district. Is there any organization or any kind of organization of the different museums for the tourists? Like this map shows historical areas. Is there anything that shows museums? Is there any way to work with other museums?
Yes.
I know there's a Las Vegas, what is it, Black History Museum that kind of...
It sits back on, it comes and goes. Don't get me started on that one either.
There'll be a lot of stuff that I could communicate
To the students, yeah.
And you'll make yourself available, right?
Oh, definitely.
Any kind of
Yeah.
questions in that. Anyone have a question now?
There is a museum, there's a museum and attractions organization. It's made up,
About them, huh?
yeah. They, again, because they're government funded, but for the most part are very, and those that aren't, those that are private funded, that are part of that, they realize that their strength lies in being a part of an organization where while we compete for visitors, we share information. And so while I consider all these other facets, all these other entities, particularly the Mob Museum, because the money they get from the city is disgusting. I mean, you know, it's not even fair. And from the Visitors and Convention Bureau, and the amount of publicity that they get in every travel magazine known to mankind. That basically comes out of your tax dollars, but for placement and different things. So it makes it hard for startups to break through. I'm not begrudging them, I just want my share.
It's just a hypothetical, like,
There's no such thing. Go ahead, just ask.
let's go like 20 years in the future. How do you want to see the area? How do you want the area to be?
Wow, that's it. I would like that area to be kind of like going to the district by Green Valley Ranch, uptown by Summerlin, with more of a feel, if you will, of looseness or camaraderie as what the downtown East Las Vegas, East Fremont Street Zappos was trying to do. I don't think they've quite achieved it yet, But
There's the art district down there too.
there's the art, but the art,
Is there anything about a black art history? It could be music, art.
it could be, yeah, exactly, that's the theme, you know, it's, Katie calls it, what's her new thing? Soul Town? You know, Soul Town, which is in uptown Las Vegas, you know. Something along those, so that's what I would like for it to see. You know, and hopefully it won't take 20 years for it to get there. But something like that, something where if you think of something that's Afrocentric, if you will, that different vibe or a different beat, or where you might just say, go, I want to hear live R&B music. You know, it's not in a casino showroom. And I want to get some ribs and maybe some collard greens and, you know, some soul food kind of thing. And maybe grab a new hat or a new dress or a new something or other and be embodied in this atmosphere. That's what I would like for it to be. Starting as you come under the bridge at F Street, or if you come under from Washington, or you come down from the north, when you hit there, you know it. It's kind of like that old thing, you know, you take an A train uptown New York. If you're going to Harlem.
That's hard to get a critical mass to grow to that without somebody just coming in and building like a mall or a village or something like that and renting out different parts. Are you working at all with that? Because I know there's a lot of international investment.
There's a lot of
all that vacant area.
yeah. When you speak of the vacant areas, it's interesting because it's very difficult sometimes to pinpoint exactly who the owner is unless you're guided there by someone in an authoritative position. And so someone keeps, what I'm basically saying is, someone keeps the ownership of certain parcels of property quiet. You don't see for sale, so you can drive up and down those areas all day long. You very seldom see a for sale sign. So if someone just got so much money in their pocket that they can just let 2 acres, 3 acres of land that's what, less than a quarter mile from downtown Las Vegas, that doesn't flood, that's close, has the best freeway access in the entire probably Las Vegas Valley to get on all your major freeways. Someone just all of a sudden just decides, I think I'll just sit on this land and just not develop it. So a lot of things go into it. I don't want to be this political nut job up here saying conspiracy theory, but something I think is holding down this area. This area has basically been this bad since its inception. It was called Shantytown, Shacktown, Tent City when it first got started in the right after 1930, 31 or so. And while other parts of the Las Vegas Valley have flourished, this portion of the city has lagged behind.
There was a very vibrant business community at one time.
You know what killed it? Something called integration. Yeah, once we integrated, everybody left and went there, and they never came back. But they came back to all the other areas of the Las Vegas Valley. But for some reason, this area never came back. Buildings have a strange way of catching on fire in this area. I'm just saying, the buildings have a strange way of catching on fire. You talk to some of the historians about the first Moulin Rouge fire, and they'll start talking to you about when the fire department showed up, their hoses for some reason couldn't connect with all the hydrants. And then when they finally did connect, you know, it was like a garden hose, you know, there was no real force, you know, water coming out till they go, oh gee, well, we better call it, you know. And then all of a sudden they had plenty of water to put out the burning embers, but to save the building, no.
Okay, any questions from anybody about any positive things about?
Yeah, positive. Don't get me started on this, Nick. I think it's a very positive thing, and I think that you guys will have the energy and the imagination to give us those tools. We need things that we can like evolve into our social media campaign. We can't go around handing out paper the size of bed sheets, okay? You know, because most people won't even know how to fold it back up, and I'm one of them.
So at this moment, like, what are you guys giving away? Like,
What are we giving away now? I just got back a while ago, so I haven't really seen a giveaway, to be honest. If someone really comes in, if I find out that if I got home and there was a email message that I got a tour of 25 people coming tomorrow, I'll be up all night creating like a one-pager that just kind of highlights with some squares of this is who we are, with a brief paragraph description of the history of Harrison House, and kind of thing like that. And it would be really, really simple and not anything flashy at all. So we don't really have any good giveaways. With every change of administration, it seems like our logo changes. So I'd like to get something that can stand the test of time, that can be around after I'm gone. I don't even have business cards, because the last time they gave me business cards, I went to Canada and they got kind of mad because I still had 2 boxes. And
We'll try to get to you, post all the different kinds of design pieces that have been previously designed.
some of them are really neat. I mean, I loved them, you know. We still have one of the design pieces that adorns above the attic, above the house right now.
That's the logo.
Yeah, the logo.
Well, we need to take a break here, and also I need to address a few things before I go home. Any last-minute comments? Questions? Complaints?
Yes, complaint?
So if you received this funding, would you be able to like print a lot of stuff? Or like, do you have a budget, is what I'm saying?
Do we have a budget now?
For marketing yourselves?
No. We hope to get one, and I think if we're successful with our appeal to the state's Cultural Center and Preservation Museum Board, there'll be some money in that, because I'm sure they're not going to give us the amount of money that we need and not give us something to promote it.
I just think it's a really good start for you guys, because I was kind of looking on the website. It's like, it's free. I think really just pushing your social media presence would be a really good way to start, because it's free. And
Yeah, the one-on-one class works a lot on that.
okay, yeah.
But the messaging is pretty much the same, it's just different audience.
Yeah,
That's the best way to
and that's the best way to reach it. Now that we've worked a lot over this past 2 or 3 months with this group of folks from the Right Society, a lot of them are students at Nevada State College out in Henderson. You know, they've come in with the expertise to kind of like go, gee, you guys are still doing this for your social media? And have kind of helped us out, you know. Again, you know, I used to go to a telephone booth to make my phone go, you know, with a coin in it. When was the last time any of y'all used a payphone? Exactly. Where do you even find one anymore? But anyway, that's for another story, another time.
$180 a month for a cell is not what I call non-pay.
I know. So that's what we need. You know, our social media presence definitely needs something. And then we also have to get it so that we can keep it updated. So when you're designing that and you're presenting that, give us a roadmap on how to update it. You know, yeah. Don't give us a phone and don't give us the instructions on programming it. That's not fun. Yes, sir.
where are you from?
I'm originally from Fort Scott, Kansas. Yes. I grew up in Kansas. I joined the Navy and was stationed in Oak Harbor, Washington. And then I decided to get kind of brassy one day and told my commanding officer that I want a natural hairstyle and I want to go to war. I want to be a real sailor. And they said, fine. And the next thing I knew, I was on an airplane heading to Alameda, California, where I was to report to an aircraft carrier that was bound for off of Vietnam. And I spent the rest of the war, my time in the Navy, floating around on an aircraft carrier. I got out of that, went to school in Los Angeles Community College near South Central. Then went to Western Washington University, graduated from Eastern Washington University with a Bachelor of Arts degree, and I majored in communications and radio and television upon graduate and theater, and minored in dance. And then I got my first job as a television news reporter upon graduation, so I was probably one of the first 5 black males to be on television in Spokane, Washington, which also broadcast up into central Canada. Left, got a job right after that with the Bureau of Land Management as their first public information officer for the Spokane district, and was the first black to be in that particular position, which is unusual. I didn't know a lot about the great outdoors. And then I transferred to Las Vegas to become their first public information officer for Southern Nevada, and left there and went to work for the Regional Transportation Commission to be their first marketing and public information manager. First to launch the CAT bus system, first to head up a team that earned national marketing awards for marketing of the CAT bus system. Left there, started my own PR firm because I had an opportunity to sell advertising on the CAT buses since I introduced that program, and got beat out in a bid contest after I wrote the bid specs. Still couldn't beat the top bidders, and just kind of kicked it around for a little while, did some freelance work, worked on the Moulin Rouge Development Corporation, which was a group of individuals that were trying to revive the Moulin Rouge, and then the fire came and burned my job to the ground. And met Catherine Duncan, started working with her with the Ward 5 Chamber of Commerce. Went to Vancouver, got married. Lovely wedding in the park on a somewhat cloudy day. Sun came out just as we said the I do's. And then moved back here. That's why when there's always a woman involved, everyone here knows it. And so that's why I'm here.